ahead and get started today. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Elizabeth Kitsky, and I'm the Community Relations Assistant at Belmont Village Senior Living Green Hills. Belmont Village Senior Living is a leading provider of assisted living and award-winning memory care. From the beginning, our company has acknowledged the unique care needs of residents by building a robust health and wellness models. That includes around-the-clock licensed nurses, medication and diabetes management, and professional therapy services. Today, Belmont Village Senior Living has more than 30 locations across the country and in Mexico City, and ongoing collaborations with USC, UCLA, Vanderbilt, and more continually improve our cognitive health and evidence-based enrichment programs. If you guys would like any information about senior living solutions from our Belmont Village Green Hills community or any of our Southeastern communities can provide, please do not hesitate to reach out to Justin Thomas or myself. Below, we have also listed the contacts for the specific communities and invite you to reach out to each of them or any of them directly. Today, we are pleased to be presenting Avoiding Potholes of Family Dynamics. During this presentation, we will learn 4 concrete strategies to avoid potholes when family dynamics are uncomfortable or topics arrive. We'll walk you through what to avoid and common mistakes when you are trying to navigate through the aging process and discuss the subject with you and your family. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please feel free to type them in the Q&A box in your control panel instead of in the chat feature. Any of your questions will be submitted during the presentation, will be answered at the end. Now I'd like to turn things over to Tiffany Mann, Advanced Aging Life Care Specialist. Tiffany is a nationally certified counselor and care manager and an advocate for LifeLinks. She earned the bachelor's degree in human services and counseling and her master's in mental health counseling. Tiffany, welcome, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth and Justin. Thank you guys so much for being here today. My name is Tiffany Mann, and I want to tell you briefly just a little bit more about myself and LifeLinks and what my background is in, and then we are going to get started with the presentation. So I came to LifeLinks 2 years ago from the Alzheimer's Association. So I was with the Alzheimer's Association for 8 years. I had the pleasure and honor of supporting caregivers that were journeying with their loved ones through some type of cognitive impairment. And during my time there, I would offer those caregivers resources, support, and education. And so I got to know families, I got to learn a lot about the disease. And as I was there, I noticed that some caregivers would come back to the Alzheimer's Association ongoing, looking for that support and those resources and education that they were needing. And that led me to learn more about LifeLinks, which is a local care management group here in Nashville. And I'm going to talk about us further, but it led me to realize that caregivers really needed someone to walk alongside them in their journey with Alzheimer's and related dementias. And that's exactly what we do at LifeLinks Care Management and Advocacy. So LifeLinks is a care management group. I do want to tell you about us before we get into the presentation. So I'm going to progress the slide and show you that an aging life care manager can be one of the following professions. We can be social workers, gerontologists, mental health professionals. Our team at LifeLinks is a team of nurses and social workers that work together to fill the gaps where it is needed. So LifeLinks is part of what's called the Aging Life Care Association. There are care managers across the United States that do what we do. LifeLinks was recently bought at the beginning of this year by a company named Arosa, and Arosa has care managers across the United States. So I know we have listeners today from various parts of the country. As I talk more about what care managers do, if you feel that could be a helpful resource for your loved one, feel free to go to the Aging Life Care website. It's aginglifecare.org to find a local care manager near you. Arosa as a company has over 25 offices throughout the United States, and many of them offer care management. So care management is a term that not everybody has heard of. We are case managers, if you will. Some people will describe us as navigators or as quarterbacks. I sometimes say that we are professional daughters, but we get to come in and really help manage the overall care of a situation. More than anything, we get to figure out where the gaps are in quality of life and help those caregivers and the person journeying with whatever disease they have. We get to help them have the best quality of life possible. We are trained specifically in the care management field. We are certified as care managers. We follow a code of ethics laid out for us by the Aging Life Care Association. So what we do is a little different. Not a lot of people know about us, but I quickly realized with being at the Alzheimer's Association that so many people can benefit from a care manager. So I also want to show you this 9 core area of expertise. The words you see on the screen really help summarize what we do as care managers. We get to really know families. So today's topic is easily talked about because we really get in the nitty gritty with the families that we work with. We learn about their family culture. We get to know caregivers personally. And so we can help with all areas that you see on your screen, the 9 core areas. I sum up what we do by saying that we can help with assessment and monitoring. We have clients that have various needs. Many of them have aging needs. We also have clients with mental illness and developmental differences. We have clients with disorders like MS or multiple sclerosis. So we really help in coming in to assess the situation and then monitor it. We help with planning and problem solving. You can see on the screen, we can help with housing. We can help with identifying local resources. We can help with any type of legal issues that may be coming up. So we help with that. We help with education and advocacy. I'm going to educate you today on the family dynamics piece. We can help with medication management, and we can also help with family caregiver coaching. So the main thing I want you to know today about what we do at LifeLinks is that we can help the whole person and the whole family with working through whatever crisis they have at the moment, but also planning for their long-term care and what may come up. As I mentioned, we provide peace of mind and hopefully improve overall quality of life. And that's what we come into the situation trying to understand where, as I mentioned, are the gaps in quality of life and how can we help? So before I get on to the presentation today, this is what we're going to talk about, the 4 potholes we're going to try to help you avoid. But I wanted to read something to you. My role at LifeLinks is a care manager. I'm more on the social work side of things. So I partner with our nurses to help in managing our clients' care. But one of the things I get to do is I get to write blogs for our website, and I'll share our website with you. Well, you can see it at the bottom of your screen, lifelinks.care. You can access all of our blogs on various topics there, but I get to write blogs on topics that are that come to mind and that I sometimes it's stuff that I just want more information on. And so one of the topics I recently wrote about was family dynamics. And one of the things about the Alzheimer's Association and my work there is that I was very well trained on how to educate families and how to help them find resources and how to provide them support. But one thing and one gap in that education for me was that I didn't always know how to help people through family dynamics. Every family's different, and there's not just a silver bullet answer, if you will, for helping people when they're experiencing family dynamic issues. And so I wanted to understand more about family dynamics. And so I did some research, and this presentation is somewhat part of that research, but I wrote at the beginning of that blog. So the title was Family Dynamics, Working Towards Harmony When the Stress Level is High. And so part of that blog started off with this paragraph that I want to read to you to open up the presentation. It says, I believe God made each of us to have our own unique personalities to contribute just what is needed to the families we are put in. I remind my 10-year-old of this a lot, that God gave you your little brother specifically to be his big brother. You were meant to have each other, so get along. It doesn't always work that way or come as easy as I think it should. I get it. In families with more than one person calling the shots or wanting a part in decision making, it can be tough. Years of relationships, crisis, and hard feelings don't just go away because there's someone that needs our care. As well, there are sometimes such established roles in families that we each, as well, there are sometimes such established roles in families that we each only get to play the part we have played our whole lives. Caregiving is not a role one person can handle alone. We need caregiver teams of family and friends that can contribute to care needed along the journey. And sometimes we need help learning how to work with each other again. So that paragraph is just to kind of open us up to this conversation today, and to let you know, I know that families can be tough. We all, I think every family probably has some level of dysfunction. Even the families that appear to get along great, when stress is high and when caregiving situations are involved, that can bring out even the worst in the best family. So years of hurt and experiences and developed roles in families can all affect how we work together as a family in a caregiving situation as adults. So I totally get that. And again, I'm trying to educate my little ones already that, God gave us who we're supposed to have in our families. We have to figure out a way to work together. So we are going to talk about avoiding potholes today of family dynamics. I'm going to kind of give you 4 tips to help work through those dynamics. I'm also going to talk to you a lot about communication and education, and hopefully help you understand a little bit more about the roles that we all play in each of our families and in certain caregiving situations. And then we're just going to talk about how can you stay solution focused? How can you keep your eyes on the goal, even when there's the stress of family dynamics? Okay, some ideas and thoughts I want you to remember today. So we're talking about potholes, and we can all imagine driving in our cars and hitting a pothole. And what does it do? It can stop us in our tracks. Sometimes it can hurt because it kind of jerks the car. And it can sometimes prohibit us from going forward if it's a really bad pothole. So that's, when we're talking about family issues, we're talking about, we want to help prevent. What are the things that can stop us in our tracks? What do we do if there is hurt there? And then how do we help not let anything prohibit us from going forward? And part of my research on family dynamics, I read a lot about Home Instead Senior Care's 50-50 rule and the 40-70 rule. So I want to explain that real quick as we frame our topic today. The 50-50 rule that Home Instead Senior Care promotes is this rule that really care, no matter if you have local caregivers or long distance caregivers, we should try our best, however the caregiver makeup is set up, to have it split down the middle, kind of 50-50, 50% on, one person's plate, 50% on the other, if we can. The 40-70 rule really helps promote that early education and early really communication between family members and when their loved ones might need care. And so what this rule means is that a lot of times as adult children approach the age of 40 and their loved ones approach the age of 70, this is really when communication needs to start if it hasn't already started. So wherever you're at in your caregiving journey, I know some of you today may be coming to us approaching that caregiver journey. Some of you may be already in it, and some of you may be in crisis mode. I don't think it's ever late to approach, to make things right, but to put in place some of these best practices. But really that 40-70 rule, if you are in that age bracket, that's probably a great time to start conversation with your loved one. Some things to remember as we talk about family dynamics today: we have to agree to disagree. There are going to be topics that come up and we don't want to let them stop us in our tracks. We want to move through that. So sometimes we may have to say, you know what, we're going to agree to disagree on this topic and we're going to keep moving forward. One thing I wrote in the blog that I wrote a few months ago for LifeLinks around family dynamics was sometimes we just have to grow up and show up, whatever's going on. Sometimes we have to just say, you know what? I can't change the past. I've got to show up now for my family member that's needing my help. And then just a little quote I found, it's never too late to make things right. And that's very true. It doesn't take away from the hard pieces and parts of family dynamics, but it's never too late to really try to move forward with your loved one. Okay, hot topics that may fuel the fire. So these are just topics to remind yourself, as you are trying to have discussions with your family members, be aware that these are the things that usually cause conflict and maybe disagreement. It can be around money. It can be around family inheritance and mementos. It could be a communication breakdown. It could be around long distance caregiving, caregiver stress, and then one caregiver trying to control the whole situation. And we're going to talk more about these things, but it's important to know if there's already high stress, have a good mindset when you go into conversations about these things. Okay, so the first pothole that we are trying to avoid is either miscommunication or no communication at all. And let's also talk about who are the players at the table. Who's at the table with us when we're talking about family dynamics? So it could be all the people involved in the caregiving situation. It could be relatives, siblings, it could be neighbors involved, it could be, because sometimes neighbors become family, but it could also be that person that is dealing with the particular illness. So if your loved one is at a healthy place cognitively and physically, then they may also be at this table. And we want to involve them as much as possible, especially if they're at a healthy place in their life. So around this pothole, how do we really prevent miscommunication and no communication? So we talk and listen early. That 40-70 rule applies here. It's so important to talk early before your family is in a crisis, to kind of bring everybody to the table. And especially if that person that's needing care is able to express their wishes, we want to listen early, because there may be a time when they can't explain to us what they want for their future care or what who they want to be involved. One thing that I suggest to a lot of the families that I work with as a care manager, and we come into a lot of family dynamic situations where sometimes we are the mediator, but I will suggest to them, it's really important to have regular family meetings. This could be a quarterly meeting. This could be every other month. It could be monthly. And if stress is really high, if there's a crisis going on, it may be a weekly conversation. But a scheduled time where we can all get together, maybe it's by phone, maybe it's virtually, maybe it's in person. We're all very used to virtual meetings right now. I'm at home, if you can tell, and we're all used to those Zoom calls. So maybe it is a virtual meeting, but scheduling that regular meeting. And I'm going to jump ahead just a bit and say it would be, it's a lot easier if someone schedules that meeting that isn't the primary caregiver. Maybe there's a long distance caregiver, maybe there's a secondary caregiver that can pull everybody together, because when you're the primary caregiver, it's sometimes hard to step away. Your stress level is high day in and day out. So somebody else taking the initiative to schedule that regular family meeting. And then, to avoid that pothole, let's find points of agreement early on. And we see that one of the biggest points of agreement for caregivers is that they want the best care for their loved one. They want their mom or dad or whomever it is to be happy. That's a point of agreement. Sometimes the specifics that come along with that are the things that we start, arguing about. It is important to know that sometimes, so if your loved one is at the table with you, it's important to hear from them what they're wanting, because sometimes they're going to express that they just want things to be easy for their children, or they don't want a lot of hassle. And it's important for that person to hear. So if it's mom or dad, it's important for them to hear from their children, we want to do what you want if we can. If you have the resources, and are there things that we can agree on? So the biggest thing I want you to take from this pothole is just communication. And I recognize that every family communicates differently. Some families, and I'm married, so I can see the difference between my family, my husband's family, and we each come with good and bad things to the table. But every family communicates differently. Some families talk about everything. Some people's families talk all the time, and then other families don't talk about a lot of things, especially the hard things, and maybe they avoid those difficult subjects. But as I mentioned in the previous slide, growing up and showing up, pushing through those hard things. If your family isn't one that has healthy communication, the time is now. Let's figure out a way, even if we don't talk about, we can't maybe talk about things from our past or things that are hurtful, but let's talk about where we're at today and how our loved one is needing us. So communicate. The second thing, the second pothole is that some families don't learn about what they need to know early on. They don't pre-plan. And so again, starting these conversations, this communication early. One of the biggest potholes I see is around the education piece. Families need to, so if there's lots of dynamics going on, it's important for us to really understand, we need to find out the facts. We need to know what our loved ones are dealing with. So the education. Knowledge is power. We know that, right? So the more that we can know about what our loved one's dealing with, the better prepared we can be for going forward. So to avoid something, a pothole that family dynamics can create that could stop us in our tracks, we need to learn about what our loved one's dealing with. We need to also research resources. And this is really a pothole that can apply whether there's family dynamics present or not. If you do not know what resources are out there, you do not want to have to decide in a time of crisis where you're going to turn. So you can see it on the screen, research resources, but also form that plan B. We talk to lots of families where they have promised their loved one, and this is where some family dynamics can come into play because each family member may have a different thought around what needs to happen in a time of crisis. But some families have promised their loved one, I'll never move you from your home. I want to keep you at home if that's what you want. So we'll never move to assisted living or a nursing home. And a lot of times we aren't prepared for what our loved one's disease can entail. So we don't know what's to come. And so what I mean by plan B is, even if in your brain you think, I'm going to honor mom or dad's wishes, I don't ever want to have to move them out of their home if that's not what they want, I encourage you to come up with that plan B, research that plan B. So even if you feel like assisted living is not part of your plan, go to a Belmont Village location and tour that assisted living so that because a lot of times we hear different terms and we think, oh, we know what that is. Well, actually, we really don't. So go visit whatever it is. If it's in-home care, meet with an in-home care provider. Learn what those resources are so that if there is a crisis and you do have to look to a plan B, you don't have to figure out what that is in a crisis moment, and you already kind of have some information on it. Another topic that, as I mentioned, one of the hot topics sometimes, or topics that can fuel a family dynamic fire, is finances. So in pre-planning, it's important for families to know, what are the resources for finances? What does my loved one have? Do they have long-term care insurance? You may prevent some of those arguments with family members if you know what resources are on the table. How can we pay for future care? Are there family members that are interested in chipping in to help for future care? What are the caregiving duties? And what I mean by that is, if you are in the throes of caregiving, what are the duties what are the things that your loved one does need help with? What are the things, if you're approaching that, what are you thinking they may need help with? And again, connecting with the resources that are available. Probably one of the first things anybody will tell you in the caregiving world is, very first thing, put a power of attorney in place. Let's get in place who that person wants for their future care, to make decisions for their future care, for their financial matters and legal matters, as well as their healthcare matters. And that can be one person, that could be two people, but put that paperwork in place so that we know, okay, Sister Sarah is going to be in charge of all of the medical things because she's the healthcare power of attorney, and John's going to be in charge of the financial things because he's the financial power of attorney. Or maybe it is that one person that's both, but putting those things in order can really help prevent some of the maybe hot topics that could come up for families in a time of crisis. And then the last thing is define quality of care, and that just means ask your loved one if they can be at the table, if they can be at that family table. What do they want for their future? Who do they want to be in charge of their future care and their decision making? And what do they want? How do they want things to go? So then families aren't arguing because no one knew what mom or dad wanted. Okay, so the main one for this pothole to avoid is just pre-plan and education. Let's get everything on the table. If you can imagine, laying out your different resources, and let's see what we have to work with for going forward. The third pothole to remember here is we need to understand everybody's role. And what we mean by this is we really need to understand where each other is coming from in our caregiving situation. Where are we all coming from? And so this really takes self-awareness. You may hear me, I'm going to describe the different kind of descriptions on the screen, but it really takes self-awareness to say, okay, that's me. This is where I can improve. And then it takes some understanding and empathy to understand where someone else in your caregiving team is coming from. If I can understand more about your role and how you're coming to the table, then I can be more empathetic and I can better support you. So I'm going to describe some of these ways that each of us, so you may each identify with one of these, but some of you are in-town caregivers. And what we mean by that is some of you are the primary caregiver. So even if and so maybe I should have phrased that as primary caregiver and then secondary caregiver. But some of you may be here in, well, I'm in Nashville, so you may be here if you're here local, and maybe you do live in Nashville with other caregivers on your caregiver team, other family members, but maybe you are that primary caregiver. And so what I want to say to you is a couple tips. First, I want to say, if you are the primary caregiver, if you're the in-town caregiver, do your best to streamline communication to your family members. This is going to help prevent miscommunication. This is going to help you from getting overwhelmed with communication, because we know what it's like today to have these devices, and whether it's texting or emailing or phone conversations, it gets overwhelming to tell more than one person the same thing, to hear their responses, and then maybe to even fill in the other family members with what that person said. So do your best to streamline communication. This could be a text chain, be an email chain. It could be those family discussions where I'm going to update everybody once a week, maybe by phone or by email. Another tip to prevent family dynamic issues from caregivers becoming overly stressed is to ask for specific help. If you are the in-town caregiver, you need to ask those that are part of that family group what you need help with. You need to tell them specifically what you need help with. And I heard this kind of tip one time. If you are a person that has trouble asking for specific help, I would encourage you to write down those ways on a piece of paper. How do you need help? I need someone to sit with mom or dad when I go to the grocery store. I need help with meals twice a week. I need help with transportation to doctor's appointments, whatever it may be. Write those down, cut them up in little slits of paper, and then let people, if you think of a fishbowl, let them draw one out of that fishbowl. If you can't ask for help, identify the ways that you need help, and then give those people in your family group an opportunity to help you by pulling one of those things out. And I will tell you that a lot of times we as individuals don't always like to ask for help, but it is such a gift for people to be able to help you. We get such a happy feeling from helping others. So let people help you, but you got to tell them specific ways to help. And then you need to identify other family members' strengths in your group. Who is it that could take something off your plate? Maybe it's someone that's a CPA or really good with numbers and finances. Maybe they are the ones that take charge of the financial piece, and you are more of the hands-on caregiver. You're right there kind of going to doctor's appointments or providing that care day in and day out. One tip I want to give to out of town or what I may call secondary caregivers is don't judge your in-town caregiver, your primary caregiver. It's very hard for us if we are long distance or out of town or not involved in the day-to-day to think either things aren't as bad as they are or to judge maybe how that primary caregiver is handling things. But when you're not in it day in and day out, you really don't have a realistic idea of what it's really like. So do your best to not judge that person. And then recognize too that it's hard to maintain. The last kind of tip for those out of town caregivers is to know it's hard to maintain that primary caregiver role ongoing. Initially, someone may come into that primary caregiver role, that in-town caregiver role, and they may think, I can do this, I can handle this. And then 6 months down the road, they are realizing that they can't juggle it all. Maybe they're missing their own kids' responsibilities or sporting events, or they're getting overwhelmed with their job or whatever it may be. But I think it's important for those out-of-town caregivers to recognize that my loved one, my primary caregiver can't handle it all the time. It's important, again, here's where communication comes in, to check in with them regularly. How is that in-town caregiver doing? What help do they need? How can I support them? Now I want to talk to the out-of-town caregiver, just a couple more tips. And that when you're owning that role, it's important to recognize your limitations. You can't do as much as you want from out of town or from that secondary caregiving role. But what can you do? So this is where that out of town caregiver can do things like, praising the primary caregiver. You're doing a great job. I know how hard this is. We need to hear praise. We need to hear that you think we're doing a good job, and we need to hear that, you're thankful for us. So that goes a long way. Could that long distance caregiver provide funds for caregiving? Maybe there's something that they could fund that would help take the load off the primary caregiver. Maybe they could fund adult daycare and home care, or maybe they could fund meal delivery. What is it that they could do to help that primary caregiver? And then visit the loved one, whoever's dealing with the disease, visit them, get an idea of what it's like for that everyday primary caregiver. And I've also seen where sometimes families will give that long distance caregiver will take the loved one, the care receiver, for a couple weeks to give that primary caregiver a break. So what can you do in that role to help your loved one? Okay, I want to move on. I want to mention too, for the out-of-town caregiver, it's important to listen and honor the requests of the in-town caregiver. So again, it's all about communication. It's about sitting down and really hearing how is that caregiver doing? What help do they need? And then I mentioned already some things you can do from afar, but other things you can do from afar to actively help in that caregiving role. You can manage finances from afar. You can give the person receiving care phone calls to check in. You can deal with insurance and things kind of in the background. So we know today, especially where we're on our computers a lot and we are doing things over the phone, there are lots of tasks that an out-of-town caregiver can take off the plate of the in-town caregiver. Okay, and then let's move on then to the rational and emotional caregivers. So again, if you identify that this is you, this isn't a bad thing. This is just helping us have self-awareness about ourselves and how we can support each other. So the rational caregiver, so if you are coming to the table and you're the rational caregiver, you are facts driven. You are thinking about money and plans and what makes the most sense. So you're very practical and pragmatic, and you're coming at it from a more of a facts driven place. The tip we have for rational caregivers is to acknowledge and validate the emotions of the emotional caregiver or family member. We all are organically different, and some of us are more emotional than others. So to help with family dynamics, to help us not hit that pothole, it's important for the rational caregiver to recognize and validate. So acknowledge and validate the emotional caregiver's feelings or the emotions of your family member, but also acknowledge and share your own feelings. That can go really far, especially if I am that emotional caregiver. My loved ones, my family member, my brother, let's say, has always been very fact driven. I want to know that I'm not alone in how I'm feeling. So if you can share with that emotional caregiver that you too are scared or that you're having a hard time, that can really go a long way. For the emotional caregiver, it's important to recognize and accept others' talents, which that means if you are so emotional in the situation that you can't handle some of the responsibilities that you've been given, then it may be time to hand over some of those tasks to the more rational person at the table. And then also, it's important that if we are feeling, and we're going to talk more about this, but if we are feeling lots of emotions in our family role related to caregiving, we may need to seek out a counselor or a support group or even grief counseling, depending upon where we're at in our loved one's journey. Now I want to talk about the informed and uninformed person at the table. So this could be someone else in your family group. The informed person is the researcher. They're the educator. I would probably say this is more me. I want to find out everything I need to know about my loved one's diagnosis, what's to come. I want to learn it all. And what we would say to that is that's great. But when you're working with uninformed family members, so people that maybe aren't that type, they just aren't going to be ones to go to the internet and Google search everything. It's important, and that's okay. It's important to offer them bite-sized information. So don't overwhelm your uninformed family members with, I want you to read this whole website. Give them the cliff notes, if you will, for what your loved one is dealing with, and also allow them more time in decision making. That uninformed person at the table may not just be as ready and quickly to make decisions because they don't know as much as you. So they may need a little more time. And then for the uninformed person at the table, and we know that sometimes that's us, life is busy. We don't have time to do all the reading. Maybe we're at home caring for a spouse and multiple children, and we're busy and we have a job. And so we really rely on the informed family member to tell us more about what our loved one's dealing with. That's okay. Be open to learning and understanding. And I think we all, with whatever role we're playing in this family unit, we have to know that there's always room for improvement. And again, that comes from self-awareness, that comes from understanding our other family members, and it comes with communication. The last thing I want to mention, and I know I'm giving you lots of info, but the last thing I want to mention is that, with our roles and with what we just talked about with pre-planning and education, we want to know who will do what when the time comes. Okay. So we, again, are going to lay all the resources and decisions that have to be made out on the table. And then we're going to look at ourselves and look at each other to figure out who can do what. Who would be best in this particular role, whether it's managing the finances, doing the day in, day out caregiving, doing the research, who is going to be best for that role. And that little asterisk I have at the bottom of the slide is be flexible, meaning your family member, I may take on a lot of the caregiving duties, but maybe down the road, I got married, I had a baby, I switched jobs, I moved, whatever it may be flexible in knowing that whatever role someone in your family group took on at the beginning of this disease progression, they may not be able to continue in that role ongoing. Sorry, my dog just came in. Hopefully you're not hearing him at my feet. I guess it goes with being at home, but so be flexible. Sorry for that distraction. Be flexible, and also check in with your family unit. Again, this is where communication comes in. I want to know, are you overwhelmed with the responsibilities that you took on? What can I take off your plate? I know things have changed for you. So that is our third pothole. And it's just important to remember that it's not always how we carry the load. And I'm sorry, I have something right over that spot in the quote, so I can't read it exactly. I have a little screen right there. But the gist of this is, we all carry around a load. It's not always how it's different for every person how we carry it. So I can't read that exact quote because I have something on my screen right there, but you can read it. And it's just to say that we all carry our load differently, and that's okay. We have to be empathetic to each other and understanding and self-aware of how we're carrying our own load. Okay, some general interpersonal strategies. So these are just general things that you can remember as you work with your family unit. Presume positive intent. And what does this mean? You may have heard about this. Brene Brown, if you're familiar with her, she talks a lot about this. She's an author and a social worker and talks a lot about how we can be vulnerable with each other. But she says to presume positive intent just means to believe that everybody is doing the best they can. I believe that you're doing the best you can with the knowledge that you have, and I'm not going to assume that you are trying to manipulate things or harm things, that you're just doing the best you can. So presume positive intent. And that really has to do a lot with happiness. We are more happy. There's research around this when we presume positive intent. The other thing is the serenity prayer. You may be familiar with this from the addiction world. They read, this is part of AA and how we work through things like that. But the serenity prayer is all about accepting what you cannot change. So there may be parts of your family dynamics and relationships that you cannot change, but also having the courage to work through the things that you can. And that really comes with communication, having courage to address the hot topics, the hard topics, but also understanding that there are some things, related to our relationship that I'm not going to be able to change. The last tip is where care managers can come in, like LifeLinks, as well as a pastor, a mediator, a lawyer, a counselor. A third party is needed sometimes to help when stress levels are high with families. There's lots of personalities, there's lots of opinions. Many times we will see when an outside person can come in, they can kind of see everything and they can lay everything out and they can facilitate positive communication. So know that that's available. If your family's having a hard time communicating, you may need to bring in a third party. Okay, the last pitfall that we are going to look at is, so it says start with what is and not what should be. So with the current situation, what is it that we can agree on? What are the things that we know? So maybe we know that it's not safe for mom or dad to live at home any longer. Maybe we're not sure if we agree on what should happen, but we know that's not a safe situation. Or maybe it's that we know we need to find a new primary care doctor for our loved one. Maybe we don't know who that should be, but we know that's one of the tasks at hand. So what is it that we can agree on? What options are available for those challenges? So if it's mom or dad shouldn't be at home any longer, what are the things that, what are the resources at hand? Does mom or dad have financial resources to maybe move to an assisted living or have in-home care? What are those options? So this slide is all about focusing on what is and not what isn't. So it's really about, and you'll see at the bottom I put, stay solution focused. It's about what, let's stay on the solution track. Let's not get off track with thinking about, well, this isn't going to work and that's not going to work, or there's hard feelings there, or he doesn't know what he's talking about. But let's talk about what are the current, what's the current crisis? What are the options available for fixing that crisis? And then you see I put address the crisis and then the long-term goals. So thinking about, we can only address it's important to address the crisis at hand, and then we can think about long-term goals later. A lot of times I'll tell families that are really hung up on, where should we move mom? Should it be this assisted living? Should it be a property that has memory care? Should it be a property that has all levels of care? Should it be that we move in a loved one to help with mom or dad? What is the next best step? We cannot predict the future. We do not have that glass ball in front of us. So what is the next best step in mom or dad or whomever it is care? Let's stay solution focused. Let's think about the crisis at hand. We know there's some things we need to handle later. Let's focus on what's going well and what resources we have, and then let's make that plan of attack. So the staying solution focused, I think, is one big tip from this slide. Just staying focused on what we can do, what is needed to do, and not getting stuck in that pothole of there are no options, kind of that Debbie Downer. We don't know what we're going to do. Someone in the family dynamic group needs to be solution focused. Okay, This quote by Michael J. Fox, we know that Michael J. Fox lives with Parkinson's disease. He says, family is not an important thing, it's everything. So this kind of goes back to what I told you that I had told my 10-year-old before. You're given the family that you're meant to have, and we only get one family. And so it's not just an important thing, it's everything. We need to do all we can to support each other in our family groups. One thing I want to mention that can help with the 4 pitfalls that we've discussed today is going beneath the surface. And what do we mean by that? So there are going to be lots of feelings and dynamics that are present in families. And if you have the self-awareness to know that there are those things there and you can address them early, that can only benefit you in these just hot topic discussions with your family. So you can see on the right side of the screen, the little iceberg, and it says anger is the tip of the iceberg. And so you'll hear lots of counselors talk about that anger in families or anger in individuals is usually a secondary emotion. Usually underneath that anger, a lot of times we hear about fear, frustration, and sadness. Those are just 3 emotions that can be under fear, but you can see all of the other emotions can be right there under that anger. So whether it's yourself and you feel yourself getting angry in your family dynamic situation, or it's someone in your family that you see a lot of anger out of, just know that it could be something in you that is underneath that surface of anger, and it's probably some other emotion underneath a family member's anger. So it's important, it's healthy to identify the underlying tensions. No one wants to walk on eggshells. No one wants to have that feeling in a stressful situation that you're walking on eggshells. It's important to share our concerns and emotions in a kind way, and we already know all of this. And it's difficult for everyone involved. This is, like I said in the beginning, family dynamics are always present, and they are just heightened when the situation is stressful. So anything we can do to, if we're early on in that process, or excuse me, we are right there in it, anything we can do to help with that, we need to do. It may be that we need counseling. One of the hardest things I see in my role now at LifeLinks and in my role that I was in at the Alzheimer's Association, it's very hard for caregivers and individuals to step in and care for a loved one when there are past hurts and experiences, that were not good. It's hard to step into that caregiving role. It's also hard to step into a co-caregiving role with family members when there's that hurt and past experiences. So anything we can do to help work through that as individuals, we need to try our best to do, and counseling could be a great resource for that. Okay, I wanted to make up this slide after talking with Justin at Belmont Village. He mentioned that some people on the call today may be struggling with getting, maybe part of the family dynamic issue is actually more with the individual that needs the care. Maybe, and we know that as role reversal happens and children step into that caregiving role and parents maybe step into that care receiver role, or whatever role reversal it may be, that creates family dynamics. And so I just wanted to put some tips up on the screen for talking to your loved one about future care and about the plan B. That's a hard topic to discuss. And so one thing for you to know if you're trying to make decisions for your loved one is you should be, and I should have put this up there too, but you should be constantly kind of evaluating safety and quality of life. And these 2 things are great topics to discuss with your family group. So if you are starting the communication now, you're starting it early, these are 2 great things to check in on. Is my loved one safe where they're at? And how is their quality of life? And how is my quality of life as the primary caregiver? How am I doing? So safety is one of those things you're continually checking in on. If you're having, and the second bullet point, doing what's best for the person, I just put that up there because I know in the caregiving role, sometimes we have trouble making changes or decisions for our loved one because we've promised them we wouldn't make those future decisions. As I mentioned earlier, we'll keep you at home. we'll never look at this option B. But we have to remember, in any time that we are looking for a higher level of care, whether that's in the home or in a community, we need to be thinking about what's best for the person and what's best for that primary caregiver, and for family groups to acknowledge whoever that primary caregiver is in your particular situation, what is going to be best for them in terms of the care for that loved one. If that caregiver is stressed out, they're not going to be able to provide the best care for their loved one. If that loved one is not safe, then that's not the best care for that loved one. So we're always thinking about what's best for the person. The third bullet point is just a short tip, and I'm going to look at my time, so I'm going to wrap things up. The third bullet point is just a short tip to remind you, if your loved one is dealing with a cognitive change, as you are approaching them needing more care, or care that they maybe aren't wanting, or maybe care that they can't really process or comprehend anymore because of that cognitive change, we just need to tell them what they need to hear. We just need to tell them what they need to hear to ease the anxiety that they may be feeling. So I'm not going to go real in depth in this, but an example would be if someone with Alzheimer's or another type of dementia was really did not want to move. They didn't want to move, but you as the caregiver knew that it wasn't safe for them to be in their home any longer, then you would tell them what they need to hear. And to you, it may feel like a lie. To me, I would say it's you easing their anxiety. So you may tell them, Mom or Dad, we're going to move in here because the doctor told us to, and we're going to, stay for a few weeks, and then we're going to reevaluate things. Or, I've brought in someone to help clean your house, and maybe it's an in-home care provider. They're there to provide supervision and care to your loved one. Your loved one thinks it's someone to come clean their home. So hopefully that gets across the point that anytime we're making changes in future care or approaching that plan B that we didn't want to approach, we may have to tell our loved ones whatever it is they need to hear to feel better about the situation. The last thing I already mentioned is just do your best as caregivers not to make promises to your loved one. And I say that because I want you to know you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what the disease process is going to look like or the progression. And I would never want someone to be in a position to now have to make decisions for their loved one that they felt like they promised them they wouldn't make, because that can be really tough. Okay, just some quick online resources. These really help with communication. Communication is key. If you take anything from today, communicate, 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 even if it's difficult. The listing on the side, Caring Bridge is a great way to keep family members up to date on your loved one's diagnosis and progression. Take Them a Meal is a website you can go to just do meal scheduling. Lots of Helping Hands is a website that can help with scheduling out care. So maybe you're checking in on your loved one on Monday, the neighbor's checking in on Tuesday, your brother's checking in on Wednesday. That can be a great way to organize who's providing what care, as well as Google Calendar, which is a free Gmail type through Gmail website. And then lastly, if you are a client of LifeLinks Care Management and Advocacy, we have a website called CareTree, and that is where we keep all the information to keep everybody on the same page. And we keep things there like medications, allergies, doctors' names and numbers, our visits with your loved one, what we're seeing, what the needs are. So we have something like that, and most care management groups are going to have a place to send families like that as well. You can go to our website, lifelinks.care, to access all of our blogs and learn more about various topics related to aging and mental health. Those are all at our website. A couple four different mistakes to help you avoid, and this is in terms of care management and what we see with families is, number one, do not try to provide your loved one assistance alone. We know, as I mentioned, caregiving is not a job for one person. You're going to need people on your team. Your family group is going to need people on your team. We find it an honor to help manage that team, and so don't try to go it alone. Number two, just mentioning there that it is a lot harder to seek out individual services than it is to come at it with a comprehensive service, and that's what care management does. We look at everything. So everything related to care and quality of life and livelihood, and we help address it all. So don't seek out those individual services. Come to one group like LifeLinks, and we can help you do that. The third thing is just don't procrastinate. As I've been mentioning, come up with that plan B, know what the options are, know what the resources are, know what your loved one wants. You don't want to investigate that in a time of crisis. And then lastly, number 4, do not go it alone. Do not stress yourself out. It is not a job to do alone. As I mentioned with number 1, look for assistance that can help you. There is me and my email and our phone number at the Nashville office. If you are curious more about care management, feel free to call us in Nashville. We can also connect you with a care manager across the United States at one of our other offices. You can also visit the the Aging Life Care Association website. It's aginglifecare.org, and find a local care manager near you. You just put in your zip code, it tells you who's around. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I know it's kind of different for me not to have that interaction across the screen. And so I'm happy to take questions, but really appreciate you taking time out of your day to be here. And I hope the 4 ways to avoid those family dynamic potholes will assist you in communication with your family as you try to provide care to your loved ones. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Tiffany, for taking the time to talk with us today. And now, if you wanted to ask any questions, you can put those into the Q&A box at the bottom, and we'll make sure that Tiffany gets answers to you.
All right, we don't have any, let me see, questions on the Q&A. One question that Jen just asked Tiffany is, can we share a copy of the slides with the attendees?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to email that to one of you, and yeah, that's absolutely fine.
All right. Doesn't seem like there's any other questions. Again, thank you everyone for joining, and we will see you all on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you.